Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul, for joining us. That's the first time we're doing this in English, so that's a kind of a first trial. So allow any, well, mistakes, issues on the way, but we will figure this out later on. And without further ado, would you please introduce yourself? You are my mentor, the mentor for my family, but I would love to be, well, you to be known to the crowds of our listeners.
Okay, well, my name is Dr. Paul, and I'm speaking to you today from the city of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom. Portsmouth is the naval headquarters, and so I live right by the sea. And so it's a great spot to be. I can look out of the window and watch the boats go by. I'm married to Wynell, my beautiful wife. She's a Texas girl, but she grew up in Latin America, in Colombia, and so is fluent in Spanish. And so she also teaches Spanish as well. And we have 3 children. We have 2 girls and a boy. Who are all grown up now, and obviously have their own life and their own homes. And what do? I do a variety of things. I speak at conferences. I teach English to regular university students, but also to business people around the world. And my wife does a similar thing as well. And we spend a lot of time with university students and people of student age, not only to help them with their learning and understanding, but also to help them with their life issues.
Mm-hmm. So what I heard from that, it's a true international experience, a long experience, because the grown-up family takes a little bit of a time, I guess, and mentoring. That's why I enjoy the most with our discussion, because I keep learning from you. So thank you very much for joining. So this is about mindful fatherhood, and I shared with you all the questions that we kind of gonna go through during the conversation, but those are just questions. It's about father to father, heart to heart conversation. Mm-hmm. And said that, one thing that is kind of common in all the discussion with fathers that I know and fathers to be, fatherhood is quite scary thing, right? And you need to prepare for that, but you're never ready. Mm-hmm. So said that, would you please tell us a little bit more about your fatherhood experience?
Let me just go back a little bit, okay, just to give you just to paint a small picture. I was fortunate, I was blessed to have been raised in a Christian home, okay, and my father was a pastor. In fact, he was a church leader for over 65 years. Okay, and so people say, "Oh, does that really make a difference?" To some people it does, to some it doesn't. I was just fortunate that my father was the kind of person that raised me in such a way to understand the values of life and what we should expect from life, but also the disappointments that we can have in life. Okay, and one of the key things that he taught me he taught me a lot of things when I was just a small boy. But when I was a teenager, he said to me one day, because I was having some challenges, he said to me, "Son," he said, "you need to take people as they are and not as you want them to be. You know, sometimes we expect people to be how we think they should be, and because they're not, we become frustrated." So you say, where does that lead into fatherhood? Okay, I became a father before I was 21. Okay, and I just say this: that was my first marriage. Okay, I'm now in my second marriage. Wynell and I, we've been married now for 20 years. But what happened between my first wife and myself was not tragic, was not a mess. It was just one of those things that happened. Okay, so I was a father, and I did find it some days challenging with my son. Okay, he was very much of a stronger character. My daughter was not so strong in the way that he was, but she also had her own mind and she also had her own personality. When they became the age of really understanding, I talked to them, and I think this is something where some fathers lack. Okay, this is not a criticism, this is just a statement. Okay, we don't set boundaries in our homes. What do I mean by that? I don't mean we have to run it like a military camp. Okay, but we do need to set certain boundaries as early as we can, so that children, as they grow and as they develop into teenagers and they maybe go to college and to university, they understand what boundaries are. So, for example, nowadays, I see 9-year-olds and 8-year-olds out in restaurants. And what are they doing? They're on their iPad or they're on their phone. Mom and dad are on their phone. And sometimes you wonder if the parents are actually talking to each other on their iPhones. Okay. And I think those are the things when we set boundaries. We say, hey guys, please don't bring your phone to the table. Don't bring your iPad to the table. But we also, as the parents or as the father, it tells us, and please forgive me, I don't want to get religious, but it does tell us in the Bible that the father is the head of the house. The father is the leader, and the family follow the father. Okay. Now that doesn't mean to say, some people take that to an extreme, and the father becomes a tyrant. He becomes someone who the family, oh my goodness, daddy's home. Okay, no, we do it with love. We do it with love and with compassion. And that way our family follow us. Okay, and we don't get rebellion because we lead in love. Okay, and by leading in love, that then enables us to set these boundaries in our home. So for instance, when my son was growing up, he sometimes used to do some crazy things when he was a teenager and would come into the house very late and disturb the house. And I just said to him, sat him down one day and said, son, if you're going to live at home, there are boundaries. Please live with those boundaries. And once I explained to him why we need to live with boundaries, he was fine. So we didn't get into an argument. We didn't, like some fathers that I deal with now, even here in the UK, some fathers end up in physical violence with their sons because of, okay, that's not what we're on the earth to do. We're on the earth to develop our children into being good, strong citizens, people showing love and appreciation for what they have.
Absolutely, Dr. Paul. That's very well phrased. And while it might be controversial for quite a few listeners, the Bible story, I would like to dig a little bit deeper into this because that's interesting. Luigi Zoya wrote an interesting book called The Father, the Psychological and Historical Portrait. And he actually tracks everything from like evolution perspective, from the first apes roaming the earth and trying to figure out how to build a family, and the family being the institution that saved our lives, literally. And then how it was developed through the ages and what was the role of the father to keep, to ensure continuity between generations, to even maybe disregard some personal benefits, personal pleasures, but ensuring that's the story of the leader of the house. It's making sure that you are an anchor for the stability, for the rules, etc. And for the rules, it's quite an interesting thing. There is a separate book called Permission to Parenting. I'm terribly sorry, I forgot the name of the lady who wrote that, but I will definitely post it somewhere in the comments. She's saying something very known probably to any father right now. We're trying to be friends with the kids. Majority of parents, maybe to compensate the strictness as they've been brought in their homes. Now it's about all the flexibility and almost zero feedback when it comes to, okay, you did good, you did bad. How do this discussion with my wife. She had the older one from the first marriage, and the story there is who is actually delivering feedback to the young one.
Right.
Somebody from parents should be able to say that, yes, this is something acceptable, this is something not. Of course, the issue multiplies when there are different homes that the kid's supposed to live. One parent having one set of rules, the other one is. But I'm 100% with you that the father, as the leader of the house, should be able to formulate those rules. Doesn't mean it's a tyrant, as you mentioned. He shouldn't be a tyrant. However, he should set those rules that should be pretty much same for everyone. It's not like this is the rule only for kids, this is the rule only for adults. We need to kind of comply everyone. Otherwise, it's not a team sport anymore.
Yeah. And one of the things that happens a lot, and I experience this talking to different people that I'm helping with currently, is so often when I talk to the wife or to the mother, they say, well, the problem that we're having is, let's call the man Johnny. Johnny always says, ask your mother. Okay, so what happens is that the men are deferring their responsibility to the wife or to the mother. Okay, instead of the father saying, hey, you know what, just let me have a conversation with your mother, and I promise that I will get back to you very shortly, but I just want to confer with your mother. And by involving your wife in that conversation, it makes such a great difference. So let me give you an example. My daughter, my eldest, is probably older than you are. Okay, so she in November the 10th this year, she will be 50 years of age. Okay, so even now, when I call her or she calls me, sometimes she'll say, hey Dad, what are you doing at the weekend? And I will say, to be honest, honey, I have not an idea, because this weekend we don't have any work and we're free. Well, would you like to come for dinner? Before I say yes, she knows what I'm going to say. She said, because she's used to it now, she says, okay, so will you check it with Wynell and then let me know, right? So instead of me making that decision with my child, yeah, it's okay, we'll be there for dinner, and I don't know what my wife has planned, I will say to Wynell, hey, Julie's asked us to go for dinner on Saturday night. And of course, straight away, it's yes, let's go. Of course, we need to go. Okay. So sometimes we as men, I'm not saying that women don't do it also, but we as men, as the leader of the home, the leader of the family, should not defer our responsibilities. We shouldn't always make these decisions unilaterally without asking our partner, our wife, what do you think? That way you live in great harmony. There's never any tension or moments of strain. And if I could just continue by saying this, when you bring two families together, okay, so in my case, from my first marriage, I had 2 children. My wife now, Wynell, she had a daughter, has a daughter, she had a daughter when we met. So when I met Wynell, her daughter was 10 years of age, because Wynell is 11 years younger than I am. Okay, I'm telling you all my secrets here, but she's 11 years younger than I am. And we met in Texas and da-da-da. And for the first 2 years of us being together, Angelica, that's Wynell's daughter, made my life challenging. Okay, but I didn't get angry. I didn't give in. All I did was love her but I also set boundaries in our house, in our home in Texas. Okay. Now she thinks that I hung the moon, if you understand what that means. Now she thinks I'm the best thing that there is. Okay. Now she's 29. Okay. And so the other thing that we have to remember is this is another challenge I know some families suffer with. And I have a great example of someone that works in my office. He's 21, he's from Australia. He came here just a month before the pandemic started here in the UK. So bless him, he came to work, and the next thing he's all locked up for, months on end. But he comes from a home that his father and mother separated, they remarried. But one thing that his father insisted on was that the two families, so his brothers and sisters from this family and the brothers and sisters from this new family, work like this. And so they love and respect each other, and they have such, I think there's about 7 children in total from the two families now. But I was talking with his father about what you and I are talking about today in Australia on Friday last week. And it's amazing what you can do by leading by example. That's another thing. As fathers, we need to lead by example. We need to show our kids the right way, the best way. Now, I do appreciate that there are some fathers who are parenting that may have had an awful upbringing. They may have had a terrible childhood. Okay, and it's not always easy to forget that. But what we should try to do is say, you know what? That was then. This is now. If you follow me, okay? That was then. This is now. Why should I put my children through what I went through? I want to be the better man. I want to be the person that leads his family into a good life, into a wholesome life, into wholesome relationships.
On this particular topic, it's quite interesting that from time to time, people disregard whatever brought them up completely, which is another side of the spectrum, saying everything that was done to me was wrong, and we need to warn those guys as well, and the girls, to be very honest. Yeah, because you are the person you are right now because of everything that happens to you, maybe good, maybe bad. And then it's not about disregarding and throwing everything to the bin, but rather smart filtering. An example from something that I put in the book, but just to repeat it here, and that makes at least sense for me now. The social thing collapsed in Soviet Union in 90s. Yeah. My parents lost their job and all the crazy stuff started around. And still, they insisted that I go to the musical school. I hated this to the guts. Hated, because they forced me to do that. And I started to appreciate this only later on. And then I figured out that they preserved what was portion of their childhood. They didn't like it either. However, the benefits outweighed all the cons for that. Yeah, they did it intentionally. They suffered. I just imagined how suffered they did because they had to sit with me, do all the course and all the exercises, blah, blah, blah. It's terrible because when you hear someone playing ugly music, that's bad. But after that, it led to my obsession with math. It led to quite a few things, public performances, blah, 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 you name it. They did it. And if I would go to a psychologist and then tell them, oh, I had a terrible trauma back in the days because they forced me to go to musical, yeah, probably. You can treat it as a trauma. But that formed me. And now I'm thinking about 2-year-old daughter. Will she go to music school? I will do everything possible to preserve that experience. And it's a smart, conscious decision. Maybe not the easiest one. It will require some efforts, but that's a conscious one. So when you say there is then, there is now, there should be something that you need to find in your own experience and treat it as the cornerstone of your upbringing. Yeah. You look for the good in everything that you've been through. Okay. Now, when I use the expression "that was then and this is now,"
Okay, you're right. You look at what was then and you bring the best from then to now. But what I wanted to emphasize was for some people that may listen to this, if you're going through that situation in life and you keep thinking back to the past, you will never move forward. You'll just stay right where you are. Because, you know, I deal with many people. I was dealing with somebody last week on the phone at 4:30 in the morning who was going to commit suicide. Okay, I do a lot of that in some of the work that I do, and he didn't. And I've spent time with him since. But a lot of what he was talking about is very similar to lots of the guys I do talk to. And this guy's a father, and it was everything he threw at me was about his past. And I said to him, your past is your past, but look at your past. What was good about your past? There has to be at least one thing or two things. Let's focus on those. And the more we talked about the good things in the past, it became clearer to him. And I'm talking about a guy in his 40s. It became clearer to him. Oh, yeah. And when you stop and think sometimes about this guy had been drinking and, you know, whatever. That's what happens when we drink, isn't it? We're going to do crazy things to ourselves. But over the years, and, 2 weeks ago, I turned 70 years of age. Okay, that was a great opportunity there for you to say, oh my goodness, you don't look that old. No, I'm just joking. Okay, I'm just joking. But so I've lived a life of experiences in this country. I've lived across Latin America. I've lived in America. I've lived in most major countries in Western Europe during the 80s and the 90s. So I have seen life. I do know all about different cultures. But in every culture, it comes back to the man who is at the head of the house, and how he portrays himself. And yeah, sure, we have struggles. One of the other things I would say, and hopefully I'm staying on track for what you want to draw out of me, is it's our circle of influence. Okay, if we have the right circle of influence in our lives, if we mix with the right kind of people and we choose our circle of influence carefully. Now, I have lots of acquaintances. You know, just on Facebook alone, I've got nearly 5,000 people. Okay. But if I'm honest with you, I probably only personally know maybe 100 of those. They're just people that, as I've traveled to universities, they want to become my friend and they like to follow some of the things I do and say. I have 100 people that I could say, yes, I know them personally, but truly, I only have a circle of influence of about 12 people. And then I have 3 people who are my real close friends. Okay. And interestingly enough, every one of them is younger than I am. Every one of them. One of them is half my age. But I'm able to sit and talk with him. I've been able to help him with some of his challenges, family challenges, but also he's been able to talk to me and help me. You know, we're never too young to learn about the mindset of young families nowadays, because a family in the family home is different today than what it was 10 years ago. And so never stop learning.
Yeah, and you mentioned this. I would like to just underline that it's about diversity. Yes, there is a circle of influence, something that you need to have, and yeah, it will filter quite a few interesting things to you. But then it's your choice who to include into this circle of influence. Sorry, that's Microsoft thing keeps popping up in my head. So the story there is how intentional you are in choosing those people. Because the other side of the spectrum is a social bubble, as we all know. Because if you will select only like-minded people that looks like you are, thinks like you do, all that thing, it doesn't help much, right?
Yep.
In your example, it's half of your age, the new generation, awesome, new perspective. People from different continents, new perspective. That always like that. People from different, even religious beliefs. I'm pretty sure you have quite a few of those.
Yeah.
And I do, because of my blessing of Middle East and Africa exposure, and that's the diversity that makes us. And that's the story of the smart filtering again, not in blindly inheriting your circle of influence, rather than enriching this and doing this intentionally. If you allow me a story from Middle East and Africa, a friend of mine, we grew up together in suburbs of Moscow in 90s. And there was a quite popular, well, you know, the tougher the times, the crazier the ideas. And all the white power movement sparked on, you know, the skinheads and all the crazy stuff. It's been there. God bless me without going into anything like that close enough. But the friend of mine went there knee deep, very badly. However, we didn't meet for quite a few years. And then I figured out that he started traveling and do international work, etc. Now he's happily married on a Kenyan girl, growing up, couple of kids. As last time I checked with the guy, super happy.
Yeah.
So it's about being exposed to different cultures, being exposed to different ideas. However, do not neglect your role as the man, as the male, as the leader of the house, as you put it. You are the anchor. You need to do that. And but to be strong enough, you need to have those connections outside to really be connected to and learn from in a reliable way.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And you know, when I think about my circle of influence, a lot when you talk about circle of influence, a lot of people think that they're just going to be people my age or older. Okay, the youngest person in my circle of influence is 21. Okay, and he's the young man from Australia that came here to live from Australia. Why is he in my circle of influence? Because I can learn from him. I can learn what's going on in the minds of 21-year-olds, and I can learn what's going on in the minds of 35-year-olds. And of course, I have some people that are 60. One of my close friends is 65. Okay, and you know, you can bounce things off of each other, but to go through life and to really get a grasp and an understanding why people are doing certain things, and how can it affect my family, how can it affect my life, how can it affect my business, how can it affect my future, we need to be able to communicate with people of all ages and have just a small circle of influence. And one of the other things that happens, one of the other dangers that happens in life, I always make my students in the uni smile about this when I say, please make sure that your ears do not get too noisy. And so they say, Dr. Paul, what do you mean? I said, well, because sometimes we want advice, and instead of going to those trusted people that we know within our circle, we go here, we go here, we go there, we go all over the place until we hear what we want to hear. Now, sometimes, okay, we don't need to hear what we want to hear. Sometimes we need to hear what we don't want to hear, because that person that's telling you what you don't want to hear is probably giving you the best advice.
Also very true. Coming back to a few, I cannot ask for more than extracting this wisdom of 70 years on planet Earth, because this is something that hadn't been on our channel, hadn't been in my book, because I'm quite younger. So I need to extract that part.
You're just a young boy.
I will get there. I will get there, hopefully, inshallah. However, the story here is about changes that comes with the age, right? So you mentioned your youngest, the daughter of your second wife,
yeah,
get you some hard times at the very beginning, but then she started to appreciate that later on. it never happened overnight. Probably in your case, it didn't happen. Yeah, probably. And the same story with a few friends of mine, we spoke about them, that they had some kids from the first marriage of their partners. And then it was love and hate relationship for a long period of time. And then when a maturity kicks in for the younger ones, they say, oh, now I understand. So your daughter took 2 years to start to appreciate that. In the case that I just described with a friend of mine, it took something around 10, unfortunately. And only after that, like, okay, now I understand why you're being so strict, why you did that to me, because you changed my life completely and did it in the right way. Yeah. But before that, it never happened. So I guess the story here is about tenacity and making sure that you keep what you believe, keep doing this on a longer period of time. I would love to hear from you and maybe about the people in your circle of excellence, or circle of influence, is the story of tenacity, how long it takes to really see the seeds growing, the seeds of a good education, the seeds of a good influence of a father. When the kids start to appreciate that. From your perspective, shall we expect it to happen anytime soon, or you just need to get through the, I don't know, the rough times of teenagers, and then later on maybe it will kick on?
Yeah, it's a process, number one. And what you have to ask yourself is, why am I in this? Why am I here? Okay, now, you know, most people say, well, because you love, you know, you wouldn't have got married, or you wouldn't be living together if you didn't love each other. Absolutely, that should be the priority. Okay, but when you're pulling a family together, you have to remember there are all the different components of what. Okay, now Wynell, my wife, will tell you that she used to watch some days and think, oh my goodness, is this going to work? Is this going to happen? Okay. But because my commitment was to her, but also to Angelica, the daughter, okay, I made it work. And some days it was very challenging. Some days it was very frustrating. But there are things that you do. There are things that you tell yourself, this, I need to do this to make this work. I'm not going to give up. I'm just going to keep pushing forward. Now, let's just make this a little bit light, and I'll tell you a very quick, funny story. When I met Wynell and Angelica had a little tiny dog, a little Yorkie, okay, and they're a yappy dog, okay. And one day, oh, and the other thing that happened is this: when I met Wynell and we got together, and in Texas, I bought a house, I bought a brand new house, and I had the opportunity to buy a nice new house or whatever, because I knew the builder there, whatever. We moved in. Angelica, for 10 years, had been homeschooled. Okay, because you know, a lot of Americans do that. And Wynell was also a missionary, so she had been living in Mexico and various other places. In fact, when we met, she was due to go back to work in Belize as a missionary, but when we met, she. One thing I said one day to Wynell, if this goes on a bit, I'm sorry, but I think it's just something that's just dropped into my mind. It's important. When we first met and we talked, and I came back to England and then went back to live in America, I said, if we're going to be together and we're going to make this work, Angelica needs to give us some opportunity to breathe. And I'd like to recommend that she goes to school. So can you imagine? She's been homeschooled for 10 years. Now I'm suggesting that she goes to school. And Wynell thought it was a good idea as well, and so did the grandparents. And so we talked to her, and she was very happy. Ironically, she accepted it. She said, oh, it'll be great. I'll be able to have some new friends. So she went. Anyway, I told you that just to lay the foundation. So one day she'd gone off to school. I was at home on my own. Wynell had taken her to school and was going to do something else before she came home. So early in the morning, and we had a very big, in Texas, you know, everything's big. So we had a very big garden, and this little dog was in the back garden running around. And suddenly I heard, oh my God. So I went out, and I don't know, some other animal had come in and frightened the dog. And so the dog was laid on its back with its legs in the air. Okay. Now, I tried to revive this dog with some water and nothing happened. But this will show you sometimes the lengths that I will personally go to make things happen. I picked that little dog up and actually gave the dog mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And suddenly the dog started to breathe again, came back to life. And what I discovered talking to the vet was the dog had been frightened, but also those kinds of dogs suffer with low blood sugar. And the fright that it had from another dog had frightened it so much, and the blood sugars had dropped, the thing had just collapsed. So I know that's a funny story, and some of my friends, when I told them, they just thought I was crazy. But I could have just said, oh, well, the dog's dead. You know, the dog used to drive me crazy. So I could have said, oh, the dog's dead, it's going to go. But because I did that, when she came home from school and we explained to her what had happened, suddenly, in her estimation, I'd moved up again. Now, she still didn't like me because we're only in the first 6 months here. We had another 18 months to go, but suddenly the admiration, the love was beginning to climb. Now, I know that's a bit of a crazy story or whatever, but sometimes we have to step out of what is the norm into the what is not normal to show, hey, we really care. We really want all this to work.
Well, I guess care is always normal. If you want to if you do care from the bottom of your heart, well, that's exactly what you did. It just maybe seen from outside as something strange, but I'm pretty sure inside of you, that was a pretty straightforward decision. You need to do what's right.
Yeah, just get on and just do it. But I just use that as a bit of a quick snippet example, because sometimes we ask ourselves, you know, where is all this going? What is going to happen? How is all this going to work out? And suddenly things come along in our lives that we can use to show people, hey, we really care. We really want this to work.
Funny enough, we actually do. And all we need to do is not to be afraid to show it. Sometimes it's just a showstopper. So, okay, I'm not suggesting to frame up any poor dog. For this. But, well, as a last resort, might be. But anyway, so a few other things, because again, we're talking with the wisdom, right? 70 years of it. So one thing that I'm always fascinated with, I had as personal revelations when something being told to me by my father or my parents, and I got to understand this only later on in the life. Mm-hmm. Something, I mean, it was previous century in my case as well. So I heard it from my father, and then I start to understand it only when I get closer to the age and to experience that he got. Right. Would you please give us a pleasure learning something from that big lifespan, something that was not that clear before for you, and then during your lifetime, you start to appreciate it more and more. We call it the fascinating thing of the speed of sounds. Your parent telling you something when you're 14, and you start to understand when you're 40. Exactly. So I guess.
Yeah. I guess some of the things that when I was a teenager, and remember when I was a teenager back in the 60s. So my father would often talk to me about how we see people, and about how we should go about trusting them, what we should share with them, okay, and how we share with them what we share, and not to become such an open book that you're going to get hurt. Okay. Now, I only made that mistake in the first, I learned my lesson by the time I was 26. where I shared some information with two people, two different things, two different people, two different places, but people who I thought I could trust, people who I thought I was able to depend on and rely upon. Suddenly, okay, so what did I learn from that? I learned to build the relationship first, but over a longer period. Okay, I didn't give those two relationships long enough to mature, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
You know, it was like maybe I knew these people, maybe I'd known them for a while, but I didn't really have that relationship that had matured. Okay, but what I did learn from that was have these acquaintances, have this circle of influence, but you learn you learn that when you have dependable friends, you learn when they start to share things with you. Okay, okay, now we're getting settled down, but I still take a long time. It's not that I don't trust people. Okay, I'm a very trusting person, but there are things in life that you learn. You don't need to tell everybody that, because what happens is it bounces from this one to this one to this one to this one. And then sometimes people take a different view on you. Sometimes people look at you differently and think, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that about him. That's very strange. Okay. And so you can create a problem for yourself by being too trusting too quickly.
The problem that you just described is on steroids now. Because if your father told you in 60s not to be over trusting, right now, with the help of Facebook, internet, what God has in it around this e-space, being too trusting might lead you into some bigger troubles that you can even think of. And these reputation stories, digital reputation, is the story there. And unfortunately, if you will not tell your kids this experience from 60s, my experience from 80s, thank God there was no YouTube, otherwise we will be all pretty much framed up, I'm pretty sure. But it's even more important. But this, about building reliable connection rather than acquaintances on Facebook, that's an important advice. So I'm super glad that we ended up the conversation on this note. Because the wisdom always talks in a longer period of time, and it's worth listening to. So first of all, huge thank you, Dr. Paul. I will publish this in the channel, and I hope the guys who would love to ask you an additional question, they will reach out to you. With your permission, I will also advertise your professional services. Would it be English classes for the foreign businesses? That's an important one. And I also will advertise in a gentle way your mentoring, which I truly cherish, and my family does cherish as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. Much appreciated.
All right, and I cherish our relationship, our friendship, and I cherish your family. And I just love being around you, even though it's only online. It's such a great experience for me. For now, we're gonna be at some point of the world where we can see each other finally. Absolutely. All right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul.
Thank you for asking me to come on here today. Thank you.